Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephanie Whitaker, and I am the Senior Marketing Manager at BAM Construct UK. I'm going to chair today's session, which is entitled Futuregazing at How Digital Construction Can Create the Next Leap in Decarbonisation. I'm joined by three great speakers today, Reid Cunningham, Jessie Putzel, and Duncan Alexander. And I'd like to hand over to the three of them, beginning with Reid, to introduce themselves to you, the audience.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm Reid Cunningham. I work for BAM FM. BAM FM as an entity has been operating in the UK for about 22 years. And during that time, sustainability and energy issues have been a high priority for us. About 4 years ago, we also set up a subsidiary company called BAM Energy, which is helping us from our FM services, but also supporting our customers to focus on energy improvement and carbon reduction projects. Thank you.
Jessie?
Hi, I'm Jessie Putzel and I'm Head of Sustainability for BAM Construct UK. So I head up our sustainability team, providing support to the business in developing our own strategy, decarbonisation strategy, etc. And then also providing support to clients and projects.
Great. And Duncan?
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, Duncan Alexander, UK Head of Digital Construction. Been in the industry 17 years, specialising in digital construction probably for the past 10 years. Everything from, document management systems through to digital tools that we use on site for site data capture, but really sort of looking what our strategy is and how we support the change in industry and really get our sort of digital tools best in class and drive that into our projects for the betterment of our built environment.
Great, thanks. So before we can begin to understand how the future might unfold, we need to look at where we are today. So Duncan, can you give me a brief overview as to how we are currently using digital tools to reduce carbon at BAM?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things, BIM has become a dirty word and, we shy away from it, but I think that's the foundation for what we're doing with sort of digital technologies. Really looking at, how we work with our supply chain, our design teams to make sure that we're optimizing our designs. So using obviously BIM and our sort of digital toolkits, we can really sort of understand what are the client requirements, operational requirements, and how we can sort of change the design and the specification using all of our sort of digital toolkits. So I think when we look at, things like embodied carbon, we have the tools to do it. Doing sort of energy monitoring during the design phase, really looking at what materials are in there and using that data to sort of interrogate the design, optimize it. So when, we do come to build, we're 100% happy with what we've done. I think the other side to it is, when we look at the delivery of projects, so when we get actually on site, is using the same data set, the same information to really sort of look at how we're going to manage logistics, what site setups have we got, how we can use those sort of digital tools to better inform, rehearse the building before we actually get on site. We can look at how we manage plant on site, the reduction of plant on site, but ultimately, how can we reduce waste? And I think it's those digital tools that really sort of enable us to do that.
Great, but it's not just about reducing carbon during the design and build phase, it's also about cutting carbon during operations. Reid, you and your team have been carrying out monitoring to help clients to better understand in-use carbon. Can you take us through how this works and the insights it provides?
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie. So BAM FM and the BAM Energy entity for quite a long time have been not just supporting BAM customers who have new buildings built by BAM, but actually most of our customers are already in existing estate. And in both cases, in fact, simply having good energy data provides an enormous insight, I suppose, to where we can prioritize some effort and sometimes small investments, particularly in existing properties, to improve energy performance and really get some bang for our buck. But without that data, you really are quite blind. And I guess it's like any good management approach, to have data, to have a baseline, and then measure your improvements. Until recently, most of our customers and us as a business ourselves were really relying on taking manual meter readings and occasionally checking those against our bills and reconciling the two. And it was really grossly inadequate. BMS systems had come some way to helping us gather data, but they often weren't connected to the cloud, or weren't connected in such a way that we could gather the data easily, except for downloading manually onto some kind of memory stick and then taking that around the country to an energy manager who might be able to download some data. So it wasn't very good. And I think also sometimes BMS systems, maybe they didn't necessarily, particularly older BMS systems, have very good, accurate meters, energy meters for the heat, power, gas meters. They weren't necessarily calibrated enormously accurately. And we do even have some funny stories about somebody putting in a megawatt meter somewhere, and after about 3 years, it clicked from 0 to 1 day, and another 3 years later, it clicked and said 2. So the types of meter have to be appropriate as well. But what we've done, we've invested some time and effort and money into generating what we're calling a digital energy management system, which is collecting AMR data. So this is data that's kind of broadcast from remote meters, mostly through 4 or 5G. So we're not requiring to sort of piggyback on a customer's Wi-Fi, and we're not necessarily interrupting any of that stuff. There's really simple, independent, autonomous energy data being sent to the cloud, and there we can analyze data every half hour. And I sometimes sort of call it night at the museum. So what's amazing is when you get data now and again, you don't really know what happened in the meantime, but seasonally you establish a profile and you might satisfy yourself with that. However, when you get really granular data every half hour, you can really analyze that data and see the amazing things that might be happening in the middle of the night when a building's empty. But I can guarantee everyone, if you're not looking, it's like night at the museum. There's lights coming on, there's water going through meters, there's boilers coming on, there's kitchen cookers coming on. The most bizarre things are happening, and I'd love to go into more examples because I've got dozens of them. But having that data allows you to tackle these issues, and actually very simply and sometimes very cheaply, you can make a really big effect on energy performance in existing and new buildings. Another aspect of the work we've been doing is looking at small projects, particularly around BMS improvement projects. Again, a lot of older buildings can benefit from much more modern BMS systems, head end and cloud BMS control. But also LED lighting has made a huge leap for building performance. And whether LED lighting, well, normally that's now specified in new buildings, as a default now. It's hard to do anything else. But for the existing building estate, it can be a little bit more difficult to retrofit LED lights. However, the range of lights and the quality of lights, it has matured, and one of the big items of work we're doing just now is retrofitting, for a few years now, retrofitting LED lights into buildings and making really substantial performance improvements, not only in the carbon emissions and the power consumption, but also in the quality of the environment. LED lights can produce some really nice lights, and you can get some great controls now. So even when some users in an open plan office are maybe quite light sensitive, and in the past you might have taken 1 or 2 tubes out from lights above them and end up with quite a patchy office environment, the LED lights provide a lot more user control, and they can produce a really nice environment, which is also responsive to individuals' well-being. So there's some interesting stuff around that. And I know I'm taking a wee minute here, but just another example is we've started using some IoT type systems, which are monitoring and connected to, say, motor systems for lifts and things. And what we're able to do there, rather than routinely send engineers in vans that are emitting carbon and all this stuff, and using valuable time, what we're able to do is actually monitor these systems remotely and decide whether or not they've had enough run hours to require any maintenance visit, so we can reduce our operational carbon. But also we can diagnose faults and either correct them remotely or correct them before there's actually a failure of that component. So there's a number of different opportunities coming up for us to make really big inroads using data in FM.
Great. So moving over to Jesse, what are the areas where digital can really add value when it comes to decarbonising assets?
Right, thanks, Steph. You've heard a couple of really great examples already from Duncan and Reed. First off, digital, so be it tools or approaches, it can't on their own decarbonise assets, but what's really important is that they're a key enabler. So, I think we can break this down into a couple of different areas. So when it comes to how we build, Duncan alluded to it, and how we operate as a construction company, digital approaches and importantly, thinking more digitally can and already has had quite a big impact in reducing carbon emissions. So whether it's creating sort of better visibility of our own impacts, say through smart monitoring and reporting systems for energy, fuel and waste, which we do on all our projects, through to enabling us to work in different ways. And I mean, I think we've seen a really good example over the last year or so. If you look at what's happened during the pandemic, we've approximately halved our overall travel footprint as a global business, and in the UK. So, working more virtually and digitally could really help us to hold on to some of that significant saving that we've already made. And, I think this is really about mindsets. So the pandemic forced us all to get on board with thinking more digitally and virtually so we can continue to work. And while I'm sure everyone will agree it's gone further than we'd like, it's definitely made people question how they work and think differently. And inevitably, that can then get applied to other areas of work, which is great. So beyond that, I mean, using digital modeling and planning tools could help us determine better and more optimal ways of setting up construction sites and logistics, and to carry out work more efficiently. So we're already doing some of this within the business, but could be doing a lot more. So digitally guiding machinery to reduce unnecessary movements around sites, reducing idling, reducing fuel use, which reduces carbon. And then as we're moving to more modern methods of construction, we can completely avoid those on-site emissions altogether by moving to a more efficient factory manufacturing setting. In terms of what we build, digital approaches really hold the keys to more efficient designs, which use less materials. So through the use of parametric design tools to produce structures that use less materials, but for the same output and performance. But then having better information and being able to use that information right through from the supply chain through to design and construction could really help us tackle big issues like embodied carbon. So the more data we have access to use within design tools, the more informed decisions we can make. So knowing at our fingertips what the carbon impact of one approach versus another is, and then being able to demonstrate and share that with other stakeholders would really help to unlock significant carbon savings. Embodied carbon is an impact that's happening today, so really important. And then I guess kind of lastly, over the life cycle of buildings and assets, if they've been designed with future use in mind, future adaptability and flexibility, digitalizing the process and using, again, embedding data, can allow us to easily grab and make use of products and materials in the most valuable way. So when it comes to needing to maintain or replace products within our FM business, they all have a carbon impact, but we've then got the best possible chance of extracting them for some form of valuable, ideally high value reuse and repurposing.
Great. So looking at all the value that we can get, there's obviously going to be some challenges in terms of helping us to realise that the value of adopting digital to reduce carbon. Reid and Duncan, do you have any views on what the biggest challenges are in terms of preventing us taking that next leap forward? So if I start with Duncan.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, obviously, Jesse, touching on what's happened during the pandemic. Everyone's sort of remote working. That's actually quite a challenge for digital. We're enabling people to work remotely, but then when we talk about massive data sets and, big BIM models, is like, the challenge for me is how do I enable our remote workers to get access to the same information in the same way that they would do when they're in an office with a fast internet connection. So there's that sort of, operational side of things, which is quite difficult. But I think for me, the biggest challenge is really understanding what the client requirements are and what systems that they're using. So, we get the information requirements at the beginning of a project, and we really have to figure out what is it that they want. Yes, they want a nice, shiny new building, but actually, the design and build is only a very small portion of that building's life cycle. The really important bit is, what do you want on day one, year 5, etc., etc. So really understanding their vision and where they're going. And I think for us, it's about taking them on that journey and helping them understand the potential that they have with digital. A little bit around supply chain, understanding where our supply chain are, what's happening with procurement at the moment, is a massive challenge. And how do we digitally enable our supply chain and procurement routes, take them on the journey so we can meet those client requirements. Reid?
Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, for a few years now, I guess since about 2013, I had been involved in our adoption of BIM we called it BIM for FM at the time, and we did some early kind of feasibility and tests, creating digital models for existing buildings actually, but they were, the first one was in Camden, and it had recently been finished with Revit files by BAM Design, BAM Construction. So we did have a step up, but also what we called retro BIM as well. So retro BIM for FM, if you like, trying to create BIM models for existing buildings, and for that, we kind of experimented a bit with our hospital up at Wharfdale, and they all had very positive outcomes. But I think at the time, and probably subsequently, it's been reinforced a bit. And a bit like Duncan said at the start, BIM has become a little bit of a dirty word, sadly. And I think the FM industry has had a little bit of a difficulty with investing and kind of following up the what's required to make BIM work, or make digital work. And the reason for that, I think, has been that when BIM was first promoted, it was very much focused on new construction projects, whether they're the built environment or the civil type environment. But it was very focused on sort of clash detection and the building process, and to that sector. And the FM industry is actually mostly involved in the existing building estate. So new buildings represent a very small part of the FM industry. So its effect, the effect of BIM was very marginal. And I think the FM sector kind of turned off a bit. However, there's no doubt to me that gathering this data, from new buildings like Duncan's talking about there, is an enormous step up for a building owner, a building occupier, and a building operator like an FM company. It's an enormous step up. You're getting accurate information. It's complete, which is more than can be said for a lot of asset data. And I suppose that's my point. Actually, we need to forget about BIM and maybe even put digital in brackets and just think about this as an evolution of good asset management. Because as an FM industry, we already have asset data, and we already, where we can, update and keep that asset data relevant. I think the issue here with digital is the data we can receive on these new projects is just enormously more qualitative and quantitative, and it gives us the opportunity, by gathering the right data, to understand the designer's intent and the suppliers or manufacturers' intent about how some products can be recycled or reused, how other products are maybe modular. So in 10, 15 years' time, when an FM manager who's maybe fourth or fifth generation FM manager comes across some lights that need replaced, or LED engines and luminaires that need replaced, rather than just throwing out the whole luminaire, there's asset data they can go to and that they trust, which can say, don't worry about this. Actually, this is a modular fitting. You can keep the luminaire, you can keep the reflector. All you have to do is change the light engine. And by the way, here's the people that manufacture it, and you can make contact with them. So all of a sudden, by receiving that data and maintaining that data, there's an enormous carbon benefit and potentially an economic benefit too. So I think the challenges for us in the new projects, new buildings that we operate is sort of engaging with the process, the digital process, receiving that data, that's not too difficult. We can receive the data into our asset management system, but then the responsibility about maintaining the kind of quality of that data, keeping it up to date, and I think some new skills into the FM sector, maybe new products as well. So the construction industry is very familiar with all these Autodesk and BIM 360 Field and all these products, and you already have licenses and operators. The FM industry tends to have much fewer kind of licenses, to less familiarity with these products. But these products are, if you like, the kind of library in which all the data sits. So unless we take it out, we need to maintain it in there and keep it up to date, and kind of have the skills about data analysis, data management, database housekeeping as well, which is kind of new to me. But unless you maintain your housekeeping in a database, it can get very messy in there, which I guess is obvious. And for existing buildings, I think similarly, we can be gathering different asset data, and we can be using digital tools like the ISO 19650 Part 3, not just for the new estate as it's built, but for existing estate too. It's, as I say, just a kind of evolution of asset management. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. So I'm very conscious of the time and the fact that we have probably gone past our 20 minutes. So what I will do is ask one very last question and ask people to be as concise as they possibly can be as they respond. So I'll probably merge two or three of the questions that we had towards the end together. But I think one of the most exciting ones is, can you guys give our audience today your view on what you think the most exciting development would be in terms of digital and decarbonisation and the benefits, just very quickly, that you think it would generate for customers, for clients, for contractors, in terms of the benefits they can receive, and very quickly how those people can then what they should be looking out for. You know, if they were to be investing or looking to develop some new tools moving forward. So I'll start with Jesse at the top, and then I'll on to Duncan, and then finally Reed. Be as concise as we can, please.
Thanks, Steph. There's probably too many questions rolled into one there to answer them concisely, so I'll just answer what I can. I think Reed touched on it. I think one of the most exciting things is getting a handle on how we make better use of what goes into a building over its entire life. So there's no, without better and evolved digital tools and processes, we can't make the move to a more circular economy in the built environment, but it's so important. It's really, really important for long-term decarbonisation. We're not going to be using completely zero carbon materials until whole supply chains decarbonise, right? So, if we can ensure that materials don't go to waste, we can have a big impact. And digital approaches, can revolutionise that. So having the right requirements up front, as kind of Reed and Duncan alluded to, and the right processes to hold on to that data, it's going to lead to value in the end. So instead of having a cost of either major refurbishment or demolition and getting rid of waste, you actually end up with a value. So you have, which is really important to investors, and we're already seeing them kind of recognizing that and buying into existing material stocks within buildings. So I think that's a game changer.
Duncan?
Oh, what's most exciting? For me, I think it's probably AI, machine learning. The potential. Reed talks about these massive data sets, and we've got years and years and years of information about buildings, and lessons learned. And if we can feed all that information into the machine learning technology, it's going to come back with absolute gold. It's the unknown unknowns, as we say, the things that we never really joined all the dots together. We're looking at this technology now, in terms of sort of predictive analytics, not just for the sort of design and build phase, but operations. How can we take all that data, push it into the sort of machine learning world and get those predictive analytics? That's the next big thing I think that's coming on the horizon. Reed?
Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, similarly, and maybe around the same point, Duncan. I think the idea of a digital twin is getting quite close. And in the FM sector, in operations, we've always gathered an enormous amount of data. Quite often, that's been analog type data on bits of paper and files, or through a number of different systems between the BMS and a CAFM and energy management system. Is all these disparate systems. And I think there's an opportunity now to start focusing all of that information, maybe not necessarily into one place, but like spokes on a wheel, into some kind of center where it can be viewed and analyzed. And I think there could be enormous leaps in building performance, whether it's around the well-being piece, around the carbon performance, energy performance, even taking a building being able to take itself off the grid for a few minutes. I mean, it's still consuming energy, but it's consuming self-generated stored energy, this kind of thing. I think some really exciting opportunities just around the corner by harnessing the power of the digital the sort of digital data that we're gathering and able to crunch together.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your time. That is the end of our session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.